Just this week, I had a friend tell me, Colleen, I'm eating healthy. I'm exercising. I'm literally doing everything right. So why does my body hate me? Now, I chuckle thinking about that story, but this is the reality for so many of our patients, especially those who are going through perimenopause and menopause. This season can be so annoying and frustrating. Now, even though I'm not in menopause yet, many of my friends, colleagues, and family members are. And the stories that they share are raw, they're honest, and they're full of the same sticky frustration. The sudden belly fat that feels glued on, the workouts that used to work suddenly stopped working, sleep that is completely non existent, and the overwhelming feeling of what on earth is happening to me. Welcome back to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. I'm Colleen Sloan, a PA, dietitian, and today I'm joined by Su-Nui Escobar. She's a doctor in clinical nutrition, registered dietitian, and a menopause expert. And in this shorty episode this week, she's breaking down exactly what clinicians need to understand about women in menopause. We talk about why the eat less, move more strategy doesn't work, how fluctuating estrogen levels reshapes metabolism, fat distribution, sleep, and cardiometabolic risk. She shares some advice that actually works during this stage of life, from inflammation to stress, sleep, and realistic behavior changes. And lastly, she shares what the science says behind intermittent fasting, protein, and GLP-1s for women in midlife. This episode is for every clinician who wants to support women in a season that is complicated, emotional, and massively underserved. Let's dive in. Well, Su-Nui, I am so excited to have this conversation with you. I've had several listeners message me on Instagram asking for me to cover this topic, so I'm really excited to dig into this with you. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. It's exciting to speak about this topic.
Okay, so let's start big picture so we can really understand this patient demographic in front of us. I'm really curious as to the unique challenges that women face with their weight specifically during perimenopause and menopause that makes this stage different than earlier in life.
The biggest complaint my patients have that are around this age group is I'm doing all the right things that I did before and nothing works. I'm exercising, I am eating healthy, and it just doesn't work. But there are so many factors that contribute to this. One, we need a little bit less calories than before because of age and the changes in our body. Our bodies now have a little bit more fat and less muscle. So with that, it's harder to burn those calories. We also tend to be a little less active because we're busy, right? We have kids, we have partners, we have work, we have this, we have that. So there's so many places we need to be at the same time that is hard to separate that time to exercise, to eat healthy, to do everything, to sleep enough, to do everything that we need to do to stay in a healthy weight. Also, many women face difficulty sleeping, and with that, the hormones that contribute to the regulation of hunger and appetite are disrupted, as well as we feel the need of eating a little bit more candies and more like high fat, unhealthy foods. And you cannot imagine how the changes in hormones will affect every single area of your body, including mental health, which could be another reason why women stress eat, or simply they don't have the energy to do everything that they need to do to stay in shape. There's two sides to this answer. One is physiologically what it happens, but it's also mentally how perimenopause, menopause affects women.
I think this season of life is just so unfair for women. It's just, we have so many barriers and so many things that are working against us that make it so, so frustrating. And I feel as though clinicians and even like social media influencers who are not well versed in this area don't educate and don't support patients in this season of life well at all. And so I'm curious if you've noticed any myths or misinformation about this, about midlife that you think would be important to clear up.
So many. And I think this answer, if you ask me today, my answer is different than if you ask me tomorrow, because it depends on what my patients are going through, what my friends are going through in that week, because there's just so much misinformation out there. But the biggest issue that I have is that they dismiss all the symptoms. And they don't, like, if an influencer is talking about this topic, but they don't want to educate themselves, or if as a physician is talking about this topic, but they don't spend the time in learning the new research, that is the most frustrating aspect. And I think the biggest complaint that I get from my patients is they go to a source of information, or what they consider to be a source of information, and they found very little, or they get dismissed, or they tell them, "Oh, it's just age, nothing we can do." I think that's the biggest complaint, and the biggest myth is it is nothing. It's very simple. Like, only eat better, exercise more, and all your symptoms are gonna away. Everything is in your head. No, it's not. No, it's not in the women's health. It's overall. Our bodies are changing dramatically.
You are so right. That's what I hear all the time, even just from my own family members. And they feel so dismissed and invalidated when they do go to a clinician with these symptomatic concerns. And you're right. So I want to unpack that exactly. So, how does the decline in estrogen affect weight distribution, their metabolism, and even cardiometabolic risk?
Well, to start this question in a little bit more depth, there's not just a decline in estrogen because it doesn't happen on a straight line. For years before menopause, women are going through a roller coaster. Estrogen is up, estrogen is down. All the hormones get imbalanced in the process. Let's talk specifically about weight. One is the distribution of fat muscle will change. So there's more fat, less muscle. So women have to work a lot harder in creating that muscle mass, strength training, adequate protein intake. Then there's a accumulation of body fat in the abdominal area, which is one, very frustrating, and two, increases the risk of heart disease. Um, then as we age, also the risk of heart disease will, or any cardiovascular disease will increase. And that happens because of the age, but also as we produce less estrogen, that will also increase the risk. And changes in GI. And we know that, like, having a healthy gut, that can help with weight. There's more inflammation, and with more inflammation, more obesity, and then more obesity, more inflammation, and more symptoms. So it's really a lot of little different things.
Now, something you mentioned at the beginning is that a common frustration among women in this season is that they're doing everything quote right. You know, they are working really hard. They're dieting, or they're following a low calorie, low carbohydrate diet. They're exercising. They've probably, tried everything, and they just aren't seeing results. The weight isn't coming off. They're not feeling any better. And I'm curious as to if you think some of the advice that they've been given, either on social media or from a clinician, is ineffective. And I'm curious as to what advice that is that doesn't work for this season of life that may work for a younger female.
When you're younger, it lasts more my work very well. But for a woman in menopause, perimenopause, one is it's not just nutrition and physical activity. It's beyond that, because we need to look into sleeping. We need to look into stress levels. And then when we talk about nutrition, it's going to look a little different. We might be looking more into foods that reduce inflammation, because menopause is an inflammatory process. We will need to look into higher protein. We need to also look into more fiber. And the portion sizes might have to be a little smaller. So there's a lot of different pieces that we need to put together in the each stage group that go beyond what they're eating or how they're moving. And I feel like the biggest issue in terms of wrong advice is we don't take the time to get to know our patients, because no two persons are going to look different. And we can put together younger versus older women but honestly is the person. So some doctors, physicians, influencers will tell you, oh, just if you do keto diet, that's the solution. But then when you really talk about like this population, about like, okay, with a person to a person, specific person, and you tell them, okay, so you're following a keto diet, what does that mean to you? And then they tell you, and they're not really following a
Yes.
keto diet. So I feel like the wrong advice is it happens when we don't know the person we're talking to.
Yeah, we need to take a really holistic approach with every patient population, but I think even more specifically with this population. Okay, you mentioned a specific diet name, the keto diet, but I actually got a question from one of my followers on Instagram, Elizabeth, who asked about the intermittent fasting for this patient population and what your thoughts are on that. Can it be effective? Is it safe for them? And what does the literature say about intermittent fasting specifically for these women?
It could work very well because one is going to reduce the total number of calories, and also is going to give you a larger window for your body to metabolize everything that we are eating throughout the day. Now, a few considerations for this population is not doing a fasting longer than 16 hours. An eating window of 8 and then fasting 16 works well. There's some other types of intermittent fasting out there that, that are too long, 24 hours fasting, or, they will eat once a day. That is not really healthy. And might decrease the ability to absorb the protein and other nutrients that this population needs as well. And naturally, when I speak with my patients, with some of my patients, what I notice is that for some, intermittent fasting just works with their day to day because they're really busy and they never hungry in the morning. So by having their first meal at 10, they can make a better choice at that time. And it works. It works with the schedule. So I will agree it's a great type of diet, but we also need to focus on the quality of the food that we eat during the eating window.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I'm really glad that you pointed that out because if they are fasting too much, right? Like you said, like one meal a day or going 24 hours, we also have to consider other issues in this stage of life. And that's bone density and cognitive health, right? Yes, we may want to focus on weight loss, but not at the detriment of bone loss. And so I'm curious as how do you think clinicians can balance all of these different priorities when counseling midlife women?
The end of the day is having a well balanced diet, right? And philosophies might be a little different on carbohydrates. Some people like a little bit more carbohydrates, some people like a little less carbohydrates. But at the end of the day, we need to have enough energy, enough calories throughout the day. We also need adequate intake of fruits and vegetables, adequate protein from different sources. And if it's only plant based sources, we need to just plan a little bit more to provide adequate protein intake, and overall, like try to make sure that all the pieces of a healthy eating are there. So, whether like a well balanced diet, but also we might need to supplement. Multivitamins are great for this population, but also it's not a bad idea to do a nutrition panel and figure out what are specific deficiencies the person has.
Okay, I want to move into a really hot topic right now, which is GLP-1s. And many women in this age population and season of life are turning to these to help with their weight management. So, can these be an effective and safe approach in this population?
Absolutely. One thing I want to point out is the following. When you have high blood pressure, when you have high blood glucose, what do? You might take a medication for that. So now we have medications for another chronic disease, which is obesity. So it's a great tool to have. Is it adequate for every person? No, but it's the same as taking a blood pressure medication. If you might need that help to get weight under control. Uh, Now, Side effects are going to be part of any medication that you take. The most common will be GI side effects, but there's a few other side effects. And we are focusing on GLP-1 because they're so effective, but we cannot forget that there's other anti-obesity medications out there.
Okay, so specifically in this population, are there specific nutrient needs that they need to pay attention to if they're taking a GLP-1?
Absolutely. One is like adequate protein intake. And I know that is a very hot topic. But believe it or not, they don't need as much protein as most people think. When you do the math, it is around 1.2, 1.3 grams of protein per body weight, which, for most of my patients will come to 80, 100 grams of protein a day. That is eating 2 meals a day and making sure that you have like some protein in the morning. And it could be as simple as a Greek yogurt. So adequate protein. Fiber, it's another key nutrient because, as I mentioned before, these medications come with GI side effects. And when you take enough fiber, that helps reduce constipation, that helps reduce nausea and minimize or helps manage the side effects. And last is water. Because hydration becomes really important again to manage side effects. And I always like my patients to be on a multivitamin. And then we assess the nutrition deficiencies because they are likely to happen. But as we navigate the use of these medications, we always focus on making sure they eat enough, that they have quality in their nutrition because they're eating less. So now every bite counts.
Yeah, you mentioned side effects. And although we're not going to do a deep dive specifically in this podcast episode, if you wanted to learn more ways on how to manage side effects, because this can be a big challenge for a lot of patients, after this episode is over with, go listen to episode 122. It's called How to Support Patients on Obesity Medications, a short course on side effects, satiety, and supplements. You'll love that episode after listening to that one, and it'll be linked down in the show notes. Okay, so no, you've talked about protein, but I want to get really, really practical here. Let's say we tell our patient you need to get 80 grams of protein in a day. What does that actually look like? How do we educate them in the clinic of like, how do they do this in the day? What advice or tips would you provide to a patient who's trying to meet that goal?
Usually go through their day. So morning time, do they have breakfast? If they had breakfast, is there an opportunity to have a protein? And breakfast is a little tricky, so I ask them to have 15 to 30 grams of protein. And that is, as I mentioned before, a Greek yogurt, but also a smoothie. A smoothie is super easy to make. There we can add either like some protein, like protein powder, or we can add some Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, which make it like really creamy. And that's it. You have your 30 grams of protein, 15, depending on how much you put of the protein, or a couple of eggs, egg bites. I love egg bites because they can make it in advance. So, just finding ways to add protein to breakfast. And then we go to lunch and dinner. Obviously, if they are eating any animal protein, that's really easy. Just a small piece of chicken, fish, whatever. You get their 27, 30 grams of protein very easily. Can they add protein to their side? So instead of having white rice, can they have quinoa? Can they have beans? Can they have lentils? And that will be additional proteins. And then, of course, we can always use any protein shakes and protein bars to supplement because they are convenient and they can have like a protein bar in their purse really easily.
Yeah, I love going through their day and just finding out like what are you already eating, and then a few extra things that we can add can be a really simple way. And I love using beans as a protein source because it also gives them additional fiber and other micronutrients that might be missing from their diet. So it's kind of like a superfood that is great during this season of life.
100%.
All right. Now, I know a lot of these women are looking to lose weight because this is a big challenge during menopause, but I'd like to focus on beyond the scale because I find that looking at these goals and these non scale victories can be even more effective than just focusing on losing 20 pounds. So I'm curious as to what other markers do you think clinicians could encourage their patients to track, maybe during or after therapy, whether it be diet interventions or medication?
If they have any like other symptoms of menopause, let's say they're really tired, it's really hard for them to do anything, and they start eating better, they start, moving more. And with that, their energy levels are up, and now they can go out with their friends and family. Now they can walk and they feel great when walking. Just that alone can make a world of difference in their day to day lives. Is their cholesterol better? Is their blood pressure better? Because also, like just that improvement of health can be wonderful on its own, but also wonderful in the way they physically feel day to day. Can they move a little easier? I had a patient the other day that, she had lost about like 3-4% in a couple of months of the initial body weight, which is great on its own. But now, when they go to the summer house that they have, now she can go up and down the stairs with a little bit more ease. I mean, there's so many markers that as you talk to the patients, you you understand what they really want. And when you encourage them to have a little journal with all these like non-scale wins, they feel more motivated even if the scale moves very, very slowly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I think those are more impactful than just seeing a number on a scale for a patient. And it's really important for us to remind them that those things matter too, not just a number on the scale, right?
Yes, because they often will get discouraged if they don't see 5 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we know that 5 pounds in 2 weeks, it's difficult to achieve. But for them, that's what they should be losing. But when they start thinking about everything else that they're gaining, they're more motivated, even if, things are not going as they expect them to go.
hmm Okay, I want to wrap up with just some final advice that you would leave for a clinician who's maybe doesn't have a ton of time with the patient, but they really want to give that patient something actionable, something that's really impactful that could help them achieve their goals. So, what would be maybe like one or two really high impact nutrition tips that could be something that you would leave the clinician with?
Well, if the clinician is not a registered dietitian, I will ask them to consider partnering with a registered dietitian that can guide them through nutrition with a little bit more time. But in terms of like nutrition in its own, is find a way to make healthy eating works for you. There is no one perfect diet out there. The perfect diet is what you can do day to day to improve your health and your nutrition.
Yep. I love that. Su-Nui, this has been such a helpful, quick overview because this is such a complicated season of life. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom. If people want to connect with you online, where can they find you?
I have a website that is called Menopause Better, that it goes through a lot of what I talk about in much more detail. And if you are in GLP-1s, my website dedicated to GLP-1 is Nutrition for Weight Loss Meds.
Awesome. Thank you. I will link to all of that down below. And thank you so much for being here, Su-Nui. This has been such a great conversation. I appreciate your time.
No, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you.